lecture, our primary discussion is going to be around the research paper, the analytical report. And the lecture slides are going to be talking about the report process, but I want to open this lecture by talking about the specific report assignment itself. So in a nutshell, what you're going to be doing for this research project is analyzing 3 schools and making a recommendation as to which school's the best to attend for an MBA, a Master's in Business Administration program. Now, if you're pursuing a master's in a different field, you can also research schools that offer that master's program as well, if you're not doing business. Since you're all in a business communications course, I'm assuming that a master's in business administration is more up your alley, but you have the option of pursuing a different master's field if that suits you. So you're going to be evaluating 3 schools and making a recommendation as to which one's the best. And the reason this is called an analytical report is because you're going to be analyzing those schools based on some criteria points that you're going to set up and compare each school on those criteria points, for example, cost, and determine who's the winner on each of those criteria points, and then summing all that up to your eventual final winner, which is your recommendation. That's all spelled out in the analytical report. So the way I put together this analytical report project for you is you're going to stair-step along and work towards building this report as we click through the second half of the semester. And your first of 4 steps is due this week. You're going to be identifying your schools and also identifying the criteria that you're going to use to evaluate those schools. So let me talk about the schools first of all. Picking your 3 schools, they should be schools that would be of interest to you to attend a master's program in. So if you already have a specific subject that you're pursuing, maybe it's finance, maybe you want to find schools that are have a strong emphasis in financial master's degrees, like Wharton School of Business, schools of that nature. Maybe you want to stay in Southern California. So the schools that you're going to evaluate are going to be clustered by geography versus their area of expertise. So whatever it is, you want to have 3 schools that are kind of in the same category. Either they specialize in the same type of master's program that you're after, or they're in the same geographical location like Southern California, or maybe it's the East Coast if you want to go Ivy League schools, or maybe it's schools that strictly offer online programs. The 3 schools that you pick need to be of roughly the same caliber of school. So find a way to cluster and pick 3 schools that are of interest to you, and they're in the same geography or area of emphasis or something along those lines. So that's where you should try to focus in on what schools you want to go after. And let me talk about the criteria. So when we talk about criteria is really the yardstick by which you're going to analyze the schools. So common criteria points would be things like cost, but it could also be the caliber of the school. How much prestige does a degree from this school have versus another school? The postgraduate salaries of graduates, how many people do they place? What's their job placement rates? That would all go under the caliber of the school. What about convenience? Convenience is, do they offer night classes, weekend classes, online classes? How easy is it to get through the program? Do they have a variety of different options for executive MBAs or working students, things of that nature? That's what we mean by convenience. Accessibility. Accessibility is, how hard is it to get into the school? What type of GMAT, which is kind of your SAT scores to get into graduate school, what kind of GMAT score do you have to get into the master's program of this school versus that school? So entrance requirements, and also something like the culture of the school. What are you looking for? Private schools? Are you looking for public schools? Are you looking for schools that have maybe a certain religious affiliation, or women's only colleges? Or are you looking for schools that really have strong sports programs? Are you looking for a party school, or something that has a good social component to it? or maybe a school that's known for arts, or there's a variety of ways that you could go. Those are all appropriate criteria points that you could use to evaluate the schools. And when we say criteria points, you're going to evaluate the schools on a minimum of 4 criteria points. My advice to you is that you research 5 criteria points. You're going to be writing for 4 criteria points. But you should probably research for 5, and you may find that I'm not getting any info on one of these 5 criteria points, or this one out of my 5 is kind of weak. So I'm going to go with my top 4 criteria points where I have the best research. So for this week's assignment, this is a very simple assignment. You're simply going to, in the assignment itself, it's 10 points. In the comment box, you don't need to attach a PDF file. It's not a written assignment like your previous ones where you're typing up a formal document and saving it as a PDF and uploading it. You're simply going into the comment box of the assignment and typing in, here's my 3 schools, and here's my criteria points that I'm going to use to evaluate those schools. That's it. Now, to further educate yourself on the Analytical Report project, when you open up the course and you're in the modules view, the very first module which you saw in week 1 when you started the course was the Start Here, Welcome to the Course module. And then there's also a resource page under Course Resources that is for the Analytical Report project. You want to click on that link, and in there it'll give you, here's everything you need to know about the project. So the project is stepped. You have your first step that I just explained in this. But look at that Analytical Report resource page for more detail on what we're doing. Okay, so this week, pretty straightforward on the assignment. The rest of the lecture and my next slides, I'm going to actually be talking about Chapter 9 and understanding the report process and how to do research. So 3 learning outcomes for Chapter 9, understanding some of the different types of reports that are out there, from formal reports to less informal reports, and also proposals. Learning objective number 2 is how to basically gather information and research, and some of the methods for doing that. And then item 3 is how to interpret all that data and put it forward in meaningful data that you can present for an analytical report. So here's your key terms out of Chapter 9. So you're going to be writing a formal report to do your analytical report. So a formal report is one where it has a cover page and a table of contents, and it has some window dressing elements to it, headers, it has a works cited. That's the type of report you're going to be writing for this project. And the specific type of formal report you're going to be writing is an analytical report. And I'll get into that in a little bit. So other things that are emphasized in Chapter 9 include another type of report is a proposal. So these are written up in business quite a bit when you as a business are writing a proposal to do business for somebody else. A client might ask for a request for proposals, and you're going to write up a formal proposal on that. You don't need to write a proposal in this class, but you should definitely look at some of the structures out of Chapter 9 if this is something you do. If you're a contractor or you're routinely writing bids and sending out proposals for work, you want to understand how proposals work. The other terms you see below proposal on the bullet points in this slide have to do with research terms, such as secondary and primary research. For this assignment, you're going to be doing secondary research. Secondary research is simply research that's already out there. It already exists. And you're going to go online and search websites. You might even look at the textbook. It's already existing. It's secondary research. Primary research is research you go out and get brand new. That's focus groups, that's interviews, that's surveys, where you need answers to a specific research question. You're trying to solve a certain problem. And there is no secondary research out there that's going to really address this for you. So go out and get brand new research. You don't have to do any primary research for this project. So that's good news. However, as you go on to a four-year university, your professors probably will ask you to do some primary research. You might have to build a survey on Google Forms, or do some live interviews of people, and that's primary research. Here's the good news. It's so easy to do primary research nowadays with Google Forms, which is a free Google product that enables you to build surveys very easily, multiple choice questions, all kinds of different survey questions, and it tabulates them all for you and puts them into graphs. So it's a very nice tool. Sample validity, reliability, those are also research terms. Sample is how big is your sample size? If you're doing primary research, how many people are you talking to? So if you've taken your statistics classes yet, you know there's things like chi-squared statistics, and the larger the sample size, the more reliable your research is. Your confidence interval is higher, meaning your research may be off by 5% with a small sample size, but it may be off only 1% with a larger sample size. So that's what we mean by sample size, how many people you actually talk to. Validity, is the research valid? Is it accurate? Reliability goes along with that. And then our last term, plagiarism, which certainly comes into play when we're talking about writing reports, especially a formal report where you're actually doing research and citing sources. So I know plagiarism is a dirty word for students to hear. And the concern is, am I plagiarizing? How do I know if I'm plagiarizing? And what are the repercussions if I do plagiarize? Well, I'm going to get into that in this lecture. But basically, a research report, you're doing research, you're referring to other people who have written and studied about a certain topic, and you're taking their information and weaving it in as evidence for the case you're making in your report. As long as you cite those sources, then you're going to stay out of hot water. But if you take somebody else's research and plunk it into your report, and you don't make any mention that this actually came from somebody else, well, that's where you're in the realm of plagiarism. I'm sure you've heard this before in other courses. I think where students get tripped up is understanding how to properly cite sources, especially now in the online world where everything is available. You can cut and paste and move stuff around. So I'm going to explain that in this lecture as well. All right, so let's talk about some of the different types of reports. So informational reports would be something like a sales report or a budget report. And what we're going to be writing is an analytical report. So that is basically information, but with analysis as part of it and an actual recommendation. So even some persuasion components to it. So information is just, here's information, here's our current sales report for this quarter. Whereas an analytical report is making a recommendation. Here's our sales data, and here's where we think we should go as far as new products that we should sell or something along those lines. So you're going to be writing an analytical report, comparing 3 schools, making a recommendation as to which one's the best to attend for an MBA program, as if you were submitting this up the food chain to your boss who's considering getting an MBA, and he asked you to write a report and analyze some local schools. Vertical and lateral just means the direction of the reports. So most of the reports we write go up the food chain. So it's requested by somebody higher above us. We write the report and up it goes. And then they might add to it and up it goes. So typically reports go up the food chain vertically. Lateral might be just reporting from one department to another. So for example, maybe the product engineering department is providing an update to the sales department on how far along they are with the product. So this slide is talking about internal reports within the company, but sometimes reports can be outside of the company. And that's where we get into external reports. Internal reports within the company, external reports for distribution outside of an organization. 2 common ones are periodic reports and functional reports. So probably the most common periodic report that's written in business and distributed outside of the organization would be a quarterly performance report that the company prepares, quarterly earnings, and they send it out to the investment community, and all the fund managers and other folks want to see those quarterly reports. So these are on regularly scheduled dates. If you're a public company, a C corporation, then you're going to be required to put out earnings reports 4 times a year, hence quarterly. Functional reports are outside of the company oftentimes, but that is providing information on, like, here's our latest inventory update, here is our budget to actual numbers. So those could be within the company or outside of the company. So there's internal reports and external reports, simply inside or outside of the company. And then periodic and functional could be inside or outside of the company. So let's talk about proposals real quickly. So this is one business pitching their business to another company. Early in my career, when I worked as an account executive in the advertising agency field, we would hear about an RFP. Oh boy, the San Diego Zoo is putting out requests for proposals from advertising agencies. That means their advertising account is up for renewal, and all the agencies would be circling like vultures, furiously writing up proposals to try to get that account. So these are commonly done, and in the business realm, if you're a company that is handling other businesses, if you're providing services to other businesses, you're going to write a lot of proposals. And you can see some samples in the book there. And these are in response to a request for proposal, an RFP, or a call for a bid. And that proposal will spell out a number of things about the work to be provided, what the cost structures are going to be, the timing of the delivery of those items, etc. We're more interested in the research piece because we're writing an analytical report, and we know we have to do a lot of research. So let's talk about how we do that. There's two basic types of research that you do as students. There's secondary research and there's primary research. Secondary research, I know I said this earlier in this lecture, it's stuff that's already out there. So you're going to be doing secondary research for this assignment. It's quick and it's cheap to get because it already exists, but it may not answer the specific question that you're trying to address with your research. In those situations, you have to go with primary research, data collected for the first time, talking live to people with interviews, or doing a survey that's brand new. If you put together a survey and people responded to it and you had it on Google Forms, and then you posted it on your company site, or you put it into a report that you turned into my class, well, thereafter, it's secondary research to anybody else who gets it. So that's the difference between primary and secondary. Primary research is just the very first time you gather that data. And usually it's because you have a specific research need. I already covered these terms earlier when I was going over the key terms at the beginning of this lecture, so I'm not going to revisit these, but please read through these definitions, and they're also listed in your book. So this is an important point to stress, is as you're collecting research, how do we know what's good research and what's not good research? As students, you have the burden of growing up in the information age, which means everything's available to you. The good stuff and the bad stuff. Everything's available to you. So you have all this information that you have to weed through and curate, meaning find what's the best stuff. How do we do that? So I'm suggesting that for your research project, for comparing 3 schools, which one's the best to attend for an MBA, you want to make sure that you're only collecting research that is going to satisfy a criteria point. Look at your criteria points, and is this research helping me answer one of my criteria points? Because here's what's going to happen. You're going to be looking for information, and you're going to go to the school website. Excuse me. And you're going to back up your research truck to the school website, and it's going to dump a ton of information to you, all about the school and how amazing and wonderful it is. But is it really verified information, or is it just marketing material that the school wrote? How do you know that it's good comparable data that you can use to compare one school versus another school on something like entrance scores? Well, there's a ton of great sources that you can use, and I'll get into that in subsequent weeks when you actually have to do your research. But for starters, there's US News and World Reports. That's a periodical, a magazine. They put out annually a ranking of schools MBA programs. So you could Google U.S. News and World Reports MBA ranking, and you'll get a ton of information off of that. Or just a Google search on MBA rankings will give you a ton of information. But be careful as you gather that information. Is it they're trying to sell something, or is it actual like independent research? Don't just go out and start collecting information. Oh, I found a source. Let's dump it in the hopper. Because you'll quickly get overwhelmed. You'll have too much research and you can't curate and go through and determine what's good stuff and what's not. How do you know? Focus on your criteria points. Is this going to satisfy a criteria point? If not, ignore it. Ignore it for now. So evaluate the relevance of your research. Now you can also read an article. It typically has a title and maybe an abstract, which is a short little paragraph explaining what the article is about. And as you're reading online sources, you know, Wikipedia has lots of information. Is it the most solid and accurate information? Because it is kind of self-reported data, right? So does your website, does the article that you're getting from your website, first of all, you have a website, www.businessinformation.com. Okay, that's great. And then you find an article on there about MBAs. Is there an actual article title? Okay, well, there's an article. That's good. Is there an author who wrote that article, or is it just anonymous, which might be marketing materials? So, you know, you should kind of go with the, is there a title to the article? Was it written by somebody? And that's going to start improving the quality, the likely quality of that article. So have a focused approach. I can't stress this enough. Have a focused approach. And don't just back up your research truck to the school's websites, because they're going to give you a bunch of stuff, but it may not help. Look for some independent sources. Again, a Google search, MBA rankings, MBA comparisons will get you lots of good stuff. And then the real bailiwick where we run into trouble, and students are at all different levels as far as experience with citing sources and doing academic research. Once you start doing it, you'll find that it's really not that hard, but there is a process to doing it. And I'll tell you this, you know, I don't have a PhD, but when you take your upper division courses, you're going to be taking courses from professors who do have PhDs. And how do you get a PhD? You get a PhD by doing a lot of research. That's what a doctoral degree is. It's very much tied in doing a lot of research. So they understand very thoroughly how to do research and also how to cite sources, because they've written numerous large reports as part of their doctoral thesis and all that stuff. So they're going to be more augured in, more focused on you doing your citations correctly. So I want to help you know how to do this now, because you might be thinking, when am I going to use this? When am I going to need to do research? This seems like a big waste of time. It's a bunch of detail work. How's this going to help me advance my business career? Well, it'll help you with your college career, which will lead to advancing your business career. So whether or not you use this in the future, it's something that's good to know. And once you get it right, you'll find out that it's pretty easy. Here's the good news. There's tons of online sources that make it very easy to correctly cite sources for your research papers. I have listed one link here. That's easybib.com. There's citation generators that are free, several of them. When you're citing sources for a research paper, it has two components. The first component is your works cited. You know, in high school, they may have called it a bibliography. So you're going to be writing a works cited for this paper. What is a works cited? It's actually a list of works cited is the official name. And a list of works cited means that everything that's on your works cited paper, page or pages, reflects sources that you've cited in your paper. So anything that's on your works cited needs to be cited in your paper. On the flip side, if it's cited in your paper, it needs to show up on your works cited. So the two work together. I oftentimes get reports from students where they've got this big long list of works cited and like none of it's cited in the paper. Or it's cited in the paper but it doesn't show up on the works cited. So either of those are bad. They both go together. So how do you do that? Well, when you are doing your online research, you're going to have a website, and you're going to take that URL, you're going to copy and paste that URL, and you're going to pop it into a citation generator like easybib.com that you see over here. And basically what easybib.com is going to do is going to put the information in order. When you have a works cited, and works cited are listed alphabetically, meaning the citations that start, Alan, Fred, the author of the amazing MBA comparison chart. He's the first one, and the last one is Zamboni, Tony, MBA rankings by income made, right? So those are both different sources. He'd be the very last source in the list. So they're alphabetical order. They also have a hanging indent, which means after the first line, the second line is indented 5 spaces. You can go online and look for works cited samples and find plenty of these. We're following the MLA, Modern Language Association format. I know in different classes, maybe you do APA format. In the MiraCosta library, there are some wonderful pamphlets, some handouts as you go into the main entry and look to your left. There's a kiosk there that has some pamphlets. They're yellow and explains the MLA format. So in your works cited, it's going to have, the first thing is, do you have an author? Do you have an actual author who wrote the article? Yes or no? If not, the very first thing that's going to show up in your citation is the title of the article. Do you have a title of your article? Does your article actually have a name? Yes or no? If you don't have that, then you should at least have the name of the website. San Diego State University Admissions and Records website. That'd be your starting point. All of your research sources, especially if you're doing them online, which is the bulk of what you're going to do, are going to at least have a website. As I mentioned earlier, the higher quality research stuff, does it have an author? Yes. Okay, then it has an article name. An author wrote an article. If not an author, at least an article. And then after the name of the website, it's going to have some other extraneous stuff like the date the article was published, the date the article was accessed by you. That's when you actually did your research. And it's going to lastly have typically the URL, the full URL. That's not mandated anymore. That's part of the citation, but that's your citation generators are going to generate that for you. Okay. So that's the hierarchy of your research. So that's your works cited. Okay, that's great. That's your list of your sources. That's due in week 10, by the way. The bigger challenge is, how do I cite these sources in my paper, what we call parenthetical citations. So remember, when you're doing your research, it has 2 components. It's going to go on your works cited, and it also needs to be cited in your paper. Meaning, as you're writing your stuff, and here's my opinion on this school versus that school, on the criteria point of culture, and you're talking about the different schools, maybe you have a chart or a graph that's comparing them. Anytime you have detailed information that is not your opinion and it's not common knowledge, things like numbers, here's the postgraduate salaries, or here's the GMAT score requirements to get into schools. It's not walk around in your head knowledge. It's facts and figures that clearly came from a source. Whenever you have that information and you're presenting it in your paper, whether it's in a graph or a chart, or it's in paragraph form, you need to cite that source because it clearly came from somewhere. Also, if you have a direct quote, then that's going to be cited as well, parenthetically within your paragraphs as you're writing. So you might have, well, I have a variety of sources. My first paragraph, I had information that came from this source, and then my next paragraph had information from that source. Do I have to cite all these sources? Yes. Yes, you do. Why? Because it's a research paper and that's what you're supposed to do. So you're writing in your own words, but you're referring back to your research frequently, and you're doing that by citing your sources parenthetically within your paper. So that's kind of this whole, how does this research piece work? We're not just trying to fill page count. We're not just trying to cut and paste and load things in there. If you cut and paste and grab stuff from a source and throw it into your paper, even if you cite the source, I'm not looking for a paper that is composed of you cutting and pasting together other people's work. I'm looking for you to read those other sources and form your own opinion on that work, but then also where there's direct facts and figures, citing those sources as appropriate in the paper. So you have the in-text parenthetical citations, as you see with this second to last bullet point here. When you plug that URL into your citation generator, like easybib.com, it's going to make a works cited entry for you, and it's also going to give you the option to create the in-text parenthetical citation. What does that look like? It's basically parentheses, author, comma, page number. Remember what I was saying when there's a hierarchy to the research? Does it have an author? Yes or no? If not, does it have an article name? So if you didn't have an author, your in-text citation would be parentheses, name of the article, page number if relevant. Okay, Nate, but what if I have a whole bunch of sources that all come from San Diego State University? You wouldn't want your in-text parenthetical to be parentheses SDSU. You need to have enough in your parenthetical citation that I know, are you talking about SDSU admissions and records, or are you talking about SDSU history page, right? So give me enough information that I can tell one citation from another. And what I'm going to do is, as I'm reading your report, and oh, here comes a citation, I'm going to stop reading and I'm going to flip to the works cited and I'm going to check it off. That one's been cited. Very good. And by the time I finish your report, all of your works cited that are in your works cited page should be checked off. That's how you do citations. What you don't want to do is have a works cited that has a bunch of URLs in it. www.businesscomparisons.com. That is not the correct way to cite sources in your works cited. So please check out the MLA format. There's also some samples in the library. You can Google search for MLA works cited examples and get tons of those to get comfortable with what those looks like. Any questions? Give me a question. Give me an email and I'll respond to you. Plagiarism is basically where you're taking stuff and putting it in and claiming it as your own without citing the source. So we want to avoid that. If you are looking at the source and kind of typing as you go, you probably need to cite that source. If you're just doing some minor tweaks of the language, changing the N to an of, you need to cite that source. Us instructors, we have some excellent tools now to check for plagiarism, so we can go in and check the entire report and run it through, and it's going to let us know. It'll pull up where the source came from. And if you have a bunch of text that's in your report and you didn't cite that source, well, that puts you in the realm of plagiarism. My policy on plagiarism, some professors are much more stringent than I am on this. The academic policy is that professors can have disciplinary action, including failing you in the class. But what I do is I'm going to give you an F on the report with the opportunity to rewrite and resubmit the report with the maximum grade of C. So if you plagiarize, you're going to have to do it over and you're going to get a maximum grade on your second attempt of a C, assuming it's still not plagiarized. If it still has plagiarism, then it's going to get another F. So get it right, work with me. I'm here to help you to navigate this piece, and hopefully that makes some sense. I also have some excellent videos at the end here that provide more detail on what plagiarism looks like and how to avoid it. Okay, this is our second to last slide. We're almost there. Thanks for hanging in on this perhaps less than exciting topic about research. So make sure you don't have faulty research assumptions. So faulty research would be You know, we compared 3 schools on convenience. So I looked at USD, UCSD, and SDSU. And here you can see my comparison of convenience factors for the 3 schools. We got information from SDSU, and we got information from UCSD, but we didn't get any information from USD. Therefore, the winner is one of the other schools. Or we only got information from UCSD, therefore they won this criteria point. That would not be a correct way to do research. So don't base a conclusion on a lack of evidence. This is an analytical report, meaning you need to have comparative data for all 3 schools on each criteria point. I can't stress that enough. That's why I'm saying research 5, but only present 4. So if you don't have something, if you're getting stuck trying to find research, send me an email and I can help you out, but don't base a conclusion on a lack of evidence, as you see on this bullet point here. Assuming a cause-effect relationship just means make sure the research backs up the claims that you're making in your analytical report. Okay. Our very last slide. I strongly encourage you to check out these tutorials if doing research and citing sources is new to you, or if it's something that you're a bit rusty on, or you've tried it before and didn't do well. Check out these 2 sources. They will definitely help you out with this piece. And that's it. So your first step in the analytical report project is due this week. So you'll see that in the week 9 module under assignments. Very simple. Identify your 3 schools and identify your criteria points and type those up in the comment box of your assignment. Thanks for listening. Any questions about research, please don't hesitate to send me an email. Thank you.